I've seen a lot of bad decisions, but nothing like a death certificate listing a cereal as the weapon. I'm Nathan Cole, and today on Fatal Files, we're counting down the most unbelievably stupid street food deaths. From a flaming snack that ignited a man from the inside out, to a pre-med student who thought he could outsmart a peanut allergy. It was July 18th, 2017 in Jaipur, India. The evening market was packed, noisy, and routine, with flame-based food stalls working through lines of locals and tourists. Nothing looked out of control. That's what makes this disturbing case hit harder. Everything looked normal, right up to the second it wasn't. Earlier that night, Adrian Velasquez, 29, was walking through the market with two travelers he had just met at a hostel. He worked as a warehouse loader in Valparaiso and had spent nearly 3 years saving for this trip, picking up extra shifts and cutting back on everything. He also helped support his younger sister. This was his first real break. And yeah, that part makes this whole thing hit harder. By most accounts, Adrian was quiet and practical, not someone people saw as reckless. But he had one flaw that mattered here. He didn't like being the only one who hesitated. And I've seen this in a lot of cases like this. It doesn't start as stupidity. It starts with not wanting to look unsure in front of other people. The Agni Pan stall itself was simple. The vendor put a leaf filled with sweet spices into a quick flame, then placed it into the customer's mouth. That was it. It only worked if you stayed still, closed your mouth right away, and didn't breathe in. That's the whole safety system. Miss one step, and it stops being a snack. Adrian stood there watching others go first. One after another, people stepped up, took the flame, and walked away laughing. No one hesitated, and no one got hurt. After a while, it stopped looking dangerous. And that's usually how these situations start, when something risky starts to feel normal. Before stepping forward, Adrian took a drink from a flask he had with him. Later on, people said he didn't swallow it right away. He kept it in his mouth. The vendor didn't notice, and honestly, there was no reason to expect it. From the outside, everything still looked normal. The instructions were repeated. Stay still, close your mouth, don't breathe in. Adrian nodded and stepped closer. As the burning leaf came toward him, he leaned forward slightly, and then he sneezed. The sneeze pushed a fine mist of alcohol out in front of his face. The flame hit that mist instantly, creating a quick flash that snapped back toward his lips. Witnesses described it as fast, not some big explosion, but sharp and direct, right at the opening of his mouth and nose. He jerked back, then inhaled hard. That one reflex changed everything. Instead of just burning the outside, he pulled hot gases into his throat. People nearby saw him grab his neck and drop to his knees. He tried to cough, but the sounds were weak and cut off. That's usually a bad sign, and yeah, this is the part where you realize it's not something you can walk off. One of the travelers noticed first that something was wrong. Someone called for help. Others pulled him away from the stall into open space. For a few seconds, it looked like he might recover. That's the false relief moment you see in a lot of cases like this. But then, his breathing changed. Witnesses said it turned high-pitched when he tried to inhale. That sound usually means the airway is narrowing. I've gone through enough forensic breakdowns to know that once that starts, you don't have much time. His breathing got slower, more strained, and then he stopped responding. Emergency services arrived a few minutes later, but by then he was already unresponsive. The post-mortem showed heat damage inside his airway, especially in the throat. Soot was found inside, which confirms he inhaled hot combustion gases. The outside burns were minor, and that's the part that always throws people off. From the outside, it didn't look that bad, but inside, his airway swelled until air couldn't pass through properly. In simple terms, he didn't die from the flame people saw. He died from what he inhaled. The investigation ruled it an accidental death caused by the altered handling of a flame-based street food. His friends confirmed he had taken a drink beforehand, but didn't realize he had kept it in his mouth. The vendor later added clearer warnings and checked more carefully before serving. And honestly, this is where it gets worse, because the next case isn't about fire or doing something flashy. It's about something way more common that people underestimate all the time. It was March 3, 2016 in Bangkok, Thailand, just above a busy stretch of Yaowarat Road. The second-floor eatery looked normal. Narrow tables, cheap metal chairs, and a rusted railing between diners. And the street below. But the space was tighter than it should have been, and once Julian stood up, there was almost nowhere safe to move. Honestly, It's the kind of place you don't question until something goes wrong. Earlier that evening, Julian Hart was 34 from the UK, traveling through Southeast Asia after picking up short-term construction jobs back home. He wasn't reckless in the obvious way, and he didn't go looking for risky situations, but he had one habit that mattered here. When something felt uncomfortable, he didn't stop. He pushed through it and assumed it would pass. By the time he sat down, that already mattered more than it should have. He had spent most of the afternoon walking in the heat without drinking much water, and people at the table later said he looked drained. His face was flushed, his breathing was heavier than usual, and his lips were dry. When the vendor offered water as they ordered, Julian waved it off and focused on the food instead. He ordered what everyone else was eating: grilled pork skewers coated in crushed bird's eye chili, still hot from the flame. It looked simple, and nothing about it suggested any kind of risk. The first bite hit immediately, and he started coughing. At first, it didn't seem serious, just the kind of reaction people have when something is too hot or too spicy. But the coughing didn't stop. It came in sharp bursts that forced him forward, and every time he tried to breathe in, the heat and spice triggered it again. Someone at the table told him to slow down, and another person pushed a glass of water toward him, but he didn't take it. Instead, he straightened up and took another bite, like he was trying to get through it faster and move on. That second bite made things worse. His breathing broke into short, uneven pulls between coughs, and his eyes started watering heavily. His face turned a deeper red, and for a moment, it still looked like something he could handle if he just got through it. Then, something changed. The coughing stopped helping, turning into shallow, strained breaths. People noticed he was trying to inhale through a partially blocked airway. When he reached for his throat, it was clear this wasn't just the spice anymore. A piece of meat had gone down the wrong way and hadn't cleared properly. It wasn't blocking his airway completely, but it was enough to interfere with how he was breathing. At the same time, the heat and chili had already irritated his airway, and that irritation made everything react faster. His throat began to swell, his cough weakened, and airflow became limited. His breathing grew more labored with each attempt. Someone moved to help, but he shifted away, still trying to manage it on his own. That delay made the difference. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table, trying to force a stronger cough, but nothing came up. His breathing grew louder and tighter, and a high-pitched sound started to come through when he tried to inhale. At that point, people around him were fully aware that something was seriously wrong. His body went from struggling to failing. He staggered slightly, then dropped to one knee as the strength in his legs gave out. Someone moved behind him to help, but there was confusion, with too many people reacting at once and no clear action happening fast enough. Because the airway wasn't completely blocked, it didn't look like a typical choking situation, and that made it harder for people to respond properly right away. Within seconds, he collapsed onto his side. The entire sequence, from the first cough to losing consciousness, took less than 2 minutes. Emergency services were called immediately, but traffic in the area slowed everything down, and it still took several minutes for responders to reach him. By the time they arrived, he was unresponsive. The forensic findings were clear. There was a partial airway obstruction caused by a piece of meat that had not cleared, combined with severe irritation from inhaling hot, chili vapor. That irritation led to rapid swelling inside his throat, narrowing the airway until air could no longer pass through effectively. The investigation ruled it an accidental death caused by food-related airway obstruction, made worse by dehydration and the delay in responding to what was happening. Witnesses confirmed that he had been offered water and had multiple chances to stop eating when the first signs appeared. What makes the next one worse, at least for me, is how slow the decision is. You can actually see the moment where he could have stopped and just doesn't. It was August 11th, 2015, in a crowded night market in Singapore, where one dessert stall kept pulling people in with cold fog spilling out of paper cups. From a distance, it looked like a harmless trick. Up close, it looked like something fun. Something people lined up for without thinking twice. Earlier that night, Kyle Mercer was 19. School break, walking through the market with his older cousin and a few friends. They had been moving from stall to stall, trying different street foods, picking whatever locals pointed out or what drew a crowd. Kyle stayed near the front of the group most of the time. People with him later said he usually stepped in first when something got attention. By the time they reached the stall, he had already taken that role. He tried things before the others, especially if people nearby were reacting to it. The cups with vapor spilling over the sides drew a crowd, and several people were laughing after trying them. Kyle stepped forward while the others watched from behind. The snack itself was simple. Cereal is served cold enough to create visible fog when you exhale. The vendor explained how to eat it while serving. People nearby heard it. It wasn't hidden, and nothing about it seemed complicated. Kyle finished the cereal right at the counter. At the bottom of the cup, there was still a small amount of liquid, still bubbling and giving off vapor. People around him noticed. One person gestured for him to stop. Another told him to leave it. And this is the part that always stands out. He had time to set it down. Nothing was forcing him to keep going. Instead, he held the cup a second longer, looked around, and then tilted it. The reaction was immediate. As soon as he swallowed, he jerked forward, one hand going straight to his stomach. His posture tightened, and the expression on his face changed instantly. The joking stopped right away. From that point, the situation escalated quickly. Witnesses said he took a few unsteady steps before dropping to his knees. He couldn't stand straight. He started gasping, not because he couldn't breathe, but because the pain hit fast and hard. His body tightened, and he curled forward, trying to hold himself together. People nearby moved back, unsure what they were seeing at first. He collapsed onto the ground within seconds, turning onto his side and then going still. A vendor from the next stall called for help while others cleared space and checked if he was breathing. The crowd shifted quickly from watching something entertaining to backing away from something they didn't understand. Emergency services arrived within several minutes, but by then he was already unconscious and in severe shock. The investigation later focused on what was left in the cup. It was confirmed that a small amount of extremely cold liquid remained after the cereal was finished. When it entered the body, it changed rapidly and built up pressure inside the stomach faster than it could be released. The post-mortem findings were clear. The stomach had ruptured under that pressure. In simple terms, the contents inside expanded so quickly that the stomach could not hold it, and it tore open. Once that happened, the body went into rapid shock and could not recover. Authorities shut the stall down temporarily and later enforced stricter serving rules so no residual liquid could remain in cups. Witness statements confirmed that a warning had been given before the incident, but it wasn't taken seriously at the time. I've been to markets like this, and I'll be honest, when something looks fun and everyone's crowding around it, it's way too easy to forget how close you actually are to something dangerous. Before we move on to the next case, just take a second, because it only gets worse from here. If you're into real cases like this, you might want to stick around. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. It was May 9th, 2014, in Skewer, Cambodia. The evening market was packed, hot and loud, with smoke hanging low between stalls. One stand had a crowd around it for fried tarantulas, and honestly, that setup alone already feels like a bad idea. Live spiders in one tray, hot oil a few inches away, and tourists leaning in like it's harmless. Earlier that evening, Benjamin Carter, 31, had only been in Cambodia for a few hours. He worked seasonal jobs in Australia, mostly warehouse and landscaping work, and had saved for months to afford the trip. The reason he came was simple and kind of sad. He was meeting his long-distance girlfriend in person for the first time after more than a year of calls and messages. That detail matters, because this wasn't someone chasing danger. This was someone trying to have a good moment. But by most accounts, Benjamin had one habit that shows up in a lot of cases like this. He followed along until something unusual came up, and then he pushed a little too far, especially when people were watching. The stall itself didn't leave much room for mistakes. A low counter, a tray of live tarantulas, and a shallow pan of hot oil sitting right behind the vendor's hands. No barriers, no space to step back. Benjamin and his girlfriend moved with the crowd, stopping where people gathered. The tarantula stand pulled them in right away. From a distance, it looked controlled. Up close, it wasn't. There wasn't much space between the customers and the cooking area, and people were leaning in to see everything. He asked to hold one. The vendor showed him how. Grip it from behind, keep it away from your face. Simple enough. Benjamin took it anyway, but held it wrong, pinching it near the legs instead of controlling it. Not a big mistake on its own, but this is usually how things build. One small bad move. then another. People nearby noticed. Someone gestured for him to stop. The vendor stayed half-turned, watching both him and the hot oil. Benjamin lifted the spider higher, closer to his mouth, like he was turning the moment into something bigger. And this is where everything stacks up at once. The tarantula reacted as he brought it too close, biting near his mouth. He snapped back immediately, instinct taking over. He jerked his head away and dropped the spider, coughing hard as he tried to recover from the sudden pain. Witnesses said he bent forward, focused on the bite. Then, the next mistake. As he stepped back, still coughing, his arm hit the edge of the cooking setup. The pan shifted, hot oil splashed up into his lower face, lips, and mouth. And this is the part that really matters. He inhaled at the same time. That pulled in hot air and small droplets. I've gone through a lot of these cases, and even those viral food accident clips. And it's almost always this exact moment where everything becomes irreversible. Not the first mistake, but the second one that stacks on top of it. He dropped to his knees within seconds. People pulled him away from the stall while someone called for help. His breathing turned rough, then high-pitched, then weaker. It went from loud panic to barely any air at all. Emergency responders got there in a few minutes, but by then he was already in bad shape. The post-mortem was clear. The inside of his throat had been burned. Not just the surface, the airway itself. That tissue swelled quickly, and once it swells enough, air just can't move through. The tarantula bite wasn't deadly. The venom wasn't enough to cause serious harm. Even swallowing it didn't kill him. That's the part people usually get wrong. What killed him was the hot oil. Investigators treated it as an accidental death tied to unsafe handling at a street food stall. And honestly, that's the part that sticks with me. The spider made it chaotic, but the real danger was right there the whole time, sitting in a pan a few inches away. I've seen setups like this before, and I'll be honest, when everything looks normal, that's usually when people stop paying attention. But this next case hits even harder because this time, the danger isn't chaotic at all. It's something simple he already knew about and still ignored. It was October 21st, 2018, in Austin, Texas, at a crowded street fair, packed with dessert stands, food, trucks, and people shoulder to shoulder. From the outside, it looked harmless. And honestly, that's what makes this case frustrating. Nothing about it looked risky, but everything about it actually was. Earlier that afternoon, Ethan Rowe, 22, was walking through the fair with two friends from school. He was a second-year pre-med student, the type who knew the right answers, understood emergencies, and could explain things clearly. Which makes this even harder to watch play out, because he wasn't guessing. He knew exactly what a peanut allergy could do. And that's the problem. People around him said Ethan had gotten comfortable. Years had passed without a serious reaction, and that changed how seriously he treated it. He still carried an EpiPen, but not where it mattered. It stayed in his bag instead of somewhere he could grab fast, and the fair didn't help. Fast lines, messy setups, handwritten menus, and allergen labels half hidden behind trays. It was the perfect place for a bad decision to slip through. The plan was simple: eat, walk, try whatever looked good, move on. At one dessert stall, Ethan picked up a Butterfinger-style cookie. He asked if it had peanuts. One friend, just guessing, said no, based on the name. And this is the part that always gets me. He stopped there. Didn't ask the vendor, didn't check the label, just went with it. He took a big bite. Within a minute or two, he started swallowing more than usual and clearing his throat. Nothing dramatic at first. And that's how these situations trick people. There's always that short moment where it still feels manageable. Ethan stayed near the stall and drank water instead of using the EpiPen. His friends noticed his face turning red, but he was still standing, still acting like it wasn't a real problem yet. Then, it changed. Swelling started around his lips, his voice got rough, his breathing turned loud enough for people nearby to notice over the crowd. Witnesses described a tight, high-pitched sound when he tried to breathe in. That sound usually means the airway is narrowing. Someone asked if he was okay, but by then, he couldn't answer properly. One person pulled him away from the counter, while another dug through his bag looking for the injector. And this is where everything goes wrong. Ethan tried to stay on his feet, but his balance started to go. This wasn't just breathing anymore. His blood pressure was dropping. He bent forward, stumbled, and went down on his side near the stall. A bystander called 911. Austin Travis County EMS got there in about 6 to 8 minutes, but by then, he was barely responding. Paramedics treated him for a severe allergic reaction and worked to open his airway, but the delay mattered. He was taken from the scene alive, but he didn't recover. The forensic findings were clear. Peanut exposure triggered a full anaphylactic reaction. His throat swelled, his airway narrowed, and at the same time, his blood pressure dropped to the point his body couldn't keep up. In simple terms, his body reacted so hard that he couldn't breathe properly, and his circulation failed at the same time. I've gone through a lot of disturbing case breakdowns, but this one stands out because nothing about it was hidden. It was all right there. The investigation found no issue with the food itself. The cookie contained peanuts, and the label was there, just not easy to see. Afterward, the fair required clearer allergen signs and better visibility at stalls. The cause of death was confirmed as anaphylactic shock. Witnesses also confirmed the EpiPen was there, just not used in time. And yeah, that's the part that sticks. I've seen a lot of stories where things spiral out of control fast, but this one doesn't spiral. It just quietly crosses a line, and by the time it feels serious, it's already too late. And yeah, that's the part that sticks.